All right, everyone, wakey wakey. It's daylight savings time, unfortunately. I propose ending this. I believe that this should be a serious idea. Politicians have talked for a number of years about this particular issue. Twice a year, you either spring forward or fall back. And so time zones, the time changes in most states and in some countries. Most countries in the world don't do this practice. In the equatorial region, of course, it's largely unnecessary. You've got more stability as far as sunlight goes. The idea was to give people an extra hour of daylight based on the hours that they were working, going to school, things like that. This has been a huge inconvenience to farmers. Uh, Popular misconception is that farmers are actually in favor of daylight savings time and that that had something to do with its establishment. That's actually not true. It's a huge inconvenience to people who have a 9 to 5 in general, because all of a sudden their schedule changes, and it also affects the biorhythm of the human body. That is, that it's literally correlated with health problems. People are having heart attacks because all of a sudden their biorhythm is completely messed up. It causes stress on the system. It can literally kill people. This is a vestigiality. The United States originally didn't have daylight savings time. Another popular misconception is that it was established by Benjamin Franklin. He had proposed something roughly similar to it for Parisians, actually, when he was there in France as ambassador. But that never became a thing until far later. He was long dead by the time daylight savings time was a thing. It was also opposed it was I think Hoover was in favor of it, and it was overridden at the time and then established later. This is unhelpful. It's unhelpful for virtually the entire population. Most people agree with abolishing it. The vast majority of Americans don't want daylight savings time. In fact, I think is it the state of Arizona that doesn't use it? I think it's Arizona and Michigan, if I remember correctly. But the thing is, people can agree whether you should use the permanent sprung forward or fall backward model, so the standard time or the daylight savings time. There are advantages and disadvantages, by the way, to both. For example, right now, my body thinks that it's an hour off from where it actually is. It's still pitch black outside, by the way. Now, is this a huge inconvenience to me personally? No. My schedule, other than the Jeremy streams, my schedule is quite malleable. You may have noticed this. When I record my videos, I record them at my leisure. It doesn't impact me as much as it does somebody with a set schedule. So somebody with a set schedule, let's say they have to wake up at 7, they get ready, and then they go to work at 9, and then 9 to 5, and whatever. Um, in some climactic regions, it's a huge disadvantage, namely the northern latitudes. If you're closer to the equator, it affects you relatively less. So let's say you're living in Miami or something like that. Well, you're closer to the equator with more stability with regards to sunlight hours. In that particular zone, it's not going to necessarily negatively impact you as much. But if you're here in Vermont, right along the Canadian border, um, it's a little bit of a problem this time of year, yeah. It may be an advantage later in the year, post-season, so in the fall, that's rather nice. But what's the point? The idea effectively is to increase efficiency and give people more daylight hours. For some people, they rise with the sun anyway and have a malleable schedule. For example, I can wake up pretty much whenever I want as long as I have enough time to do my videos in the morning. I have to get to the Jeremy stream twice a week, and maybe I have other things that are scheduled that I have to do. Also, for some reason, the Victus doesn't have this problem, but the Alienware is always an hour off. I don't know exactly what I did wrong, tried to ameliorate it, and it doesn't seem to work. I don't know. I have no clue. Daylight savings time needs to simply be abolished. We can have a national debate over whether to keep it on standard or daylight savings time. It doesn't matter one way or the other to me personally, for example. We can debate that. It seems like most people want to revert to permanent daylight savings time. That's fine. as long as we get rid of the time changes. Now, somebody brought up one interesting thing on Twitter when I was talking about this, which is the computer systems, of course, which are geared towards recognizing daylight savings time. That might be a little bit of a problem. But if all new electronics didn't have that issue, um, then there is no issue. Most of the world doesn't even use daylight savings time, so I don't see the problem. Only about a third of the world's population dwells in a country that uses it. And there's some other methodology actually too. It's just like the year system. Go to North Korea and ask them what year it is. It's not 2025. Just saying. Time zones are another thing. Time zones are interesting because they're all over the goddamn place. Um, and don't really make sense in some cases because you've got some areas of the world that are wider than others, some provinces in the world that are wider than others. And so you get like this hodgepodge of time zones. And in the United States, they generally make sense, but it can be a little bit difficult sometimes. Should be a world standard time. Some people might have to be at work at midnight or something like that, but we can always retool them. We can always retool the businesses and govern and simply recognize that time is universal so that people don't have to worry constantly. It's like, hey, when are you flying in from LA? I'm not sure. 4 o'clock? Maybe it's five, maybe it's three. Could be 4 a.m. or p.m. I'm not exactly sure because I'm going to a foreign country. That can be a problem as well, but it's much less of a problem than daylight savings time. I think that the debate is fundamentally over. Daylight savings time in general is almost universally hated by people. Donald Trump came out and said basically he wants to get rid of it, but that it was a 50-50 issue. What he means is that it's 50-50 on whether you want to permanently lock in standard or daylight savings time, because it depends on where you're at in the country. Um, Point taken. And by the way, the liberal legacy media jumping down Trump's throat, saying, well, he's being non-committal and flip-flopping. Now, what he's saying is that there's a debate over which particular time to actually maintain. He's come out fairly strongly in favor of abolishing the concept of changing times, but he's not sure which one to change it to. And of course, that would require an act of Congress. I strongly support it regardless of which one is chosen. I don't care if it's standard or daylight savings. I realize that some people, therefore, they're trying to sleep and the sun is already up. Um, it's called blackout curtains. You can deal with that. For other people, it's, well, I have to get my kids to school in pitch black conditions. It's called outdoor lighting. And escorting your kids to school, preferably in most parts of the country. There are solutions in either instance, but the idea of constantly changing times twice a year is clearly one that we do not need. Most of the world does not do this because it's completely malfunctional. It makes absolutely no sense. That's about all. Peace out.